Hi, and welcome back to Continual. Tonight we are talking about holiday action, adventure, and romance. We're going to be looking at some books, film, talk about all the kind of fun stuff that we usually do. And I'll be your host this evening, Jim Nettles. But before we get started, we're going to make our way around the room and let everybody introduce themselves. So AJ, I'll let you go first.
Okay, I'm AJ Sherwood. I am kind of a jack of all genres when it comes to writing. I've got paranormal, for fantasy, urban fantasy, mystery. I kind of write everything. I just finished today the draft for contemporary romance, which I've never done before. So it's just me branching into different things.
What about you, Tanya?
Hi, I'm Tanya Chris. I also write under the pen name TM Chris. And like AJ, I seem to dabble in just about everything. I've got some fantasy, some Omega verse, but when I write my action adventure LEO type stuff, for some reason that always ends up pairing with BDSM for me. So I've got a couple of BDSM series that feature like court cases, cops and lawyers and that sort of thing.
Roland.
I write MC romance novels under the name Simone Scarlett. But my shtick is getting action and adventure and romance novels and kind of like smushing them together. And sort of the thing I always like talking about at holidays, I wrote a book called Codename Mistletoe, which is basically Die Hard if Die Hard was a romance book. And it's one of my favorites and it's a lot of fun. And I'm actually, so many male people who read it thought it was so fun. I actually have a male version under my own name and the original version under Simone's name. And that's my like, because Die Hard is the ultimate Christmas movie, of course.
And Nancy.
I'm Nancy Northcott. I write historical fantasy for Falstaff Books and co-write the Outcast Station science fiction mystery series with Jeannie Adams. My first sales, however, were paranormal romantic suspense. So I still write that as well as romantic suspense with no paranormal elements, because who doesn't love a good explosion?
So let's start in a good place and ask the question that I know everybody is dying to know, which is, how do you feel about Life Day, the Star Wars Christmas special? I'm kidding. So
I understood that reference.
Excellent. So what is your favorite holiday action adventure type film? What really kind of sets up the genre for you? So AJ, I'll start with you.
You know, this is going to sound weird. It's probably Rise of the Guardians. I love that movie. I liked the different twists that they did on mythology, and I liked the fact that it was very much action. Like there was things happening. It wasn't just the magic of Christmas and that. But aside from, to be honest, I don't watch a lot of American TV. I watch a lot of Asian TV. So I can reference things I've seen in Asian dramas because I tend to watch those more than anything else. But I don't think our audience would know everything that I'm going to talk about, to be fair. So,
well, we can always give people things to look into.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. I just watched one that was really excellent. That was a Thai show, and they just yanked it off of most of the platforms. But if you'll look at Until We Meet Again, that one had a lot of Christmas flashbacks or Christmas elements in it, because they love to go look at the light festivals. And that's always like one of their dates. Christmas in Asian countries is a couples and a family event, mostly a couples event. It's not something they really celebrate as a religion. It's more an event to go play with your lover. So they love to do like the dating and the cuteness during the Christmas holidays.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Tanya?
Well, if I have to marry Christmas with action adventure, then I'm going to have to agree with Roland on Die Hard, because I don't know how to go better than that. But my very favorite Christmas piece of media is a cartoon, an animated version of A Christmas Carol that stars Mr. Magoo from back when I was a child. And that's Christmas to me. That was back in the days when your mom had to look in the TV guide to figure out what one time the show you wanted to see was going to be on, and then you sat in front of the television there, and that was the highlight of the Christmas season for me, Mr. Magoo. And when I got a VHS player, big modern technology, that was actually the first VHS tape that I bought, so I could just have Mr. Magoo available to me at any time.
Well, Roland, I think we know where you're going to go, but how about you?
Well, I'm going to throw in a curveball now and say, as Die Hard ultimate Christmas movie, but what about, bear with me, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is the James Bond movie that was actually set at Christmas time and has a Christmas song in it. And it's like, for me, it's my favorite James Bond movie because it's a romance story with a tragic ending, but it's a James Bond movie that is a real, honest, genuine romance with a wedding at the end and stuff. So if you cut out the bit where somebody dies, it's almost perfect. So that's my other wild card for holiday movie.
Well, I mean, let's be honest here. That's just the ultimate bachelor party. I mean, building up to it. How about you, Nancy?
Well, as everybody's been talking, I've been thinking about it, and I really have not come up with an action adventure holiday movie. I certainly agree that Die Hard is a Christmas movie, but I like my holiday movies to have a little bit more in the way of holiday trappings mixed into them. But I always enjoy the holiday episode of NCIS Los Angeles. They always do a holiday episode. There's always a lot of running around. There's always some fighting. Occasionally there's an explosion, but there are always Christmas trappings in it somewhere, even if it's just the office all dressed up. I mean, all decorated. So that would probably be my staple. And I do like the movie Jingle All the Way, because even though it really doesn't have a traditional action adventure kind of plot, it's kind of slapstick. There is a lot of running about and a lot of stuff happening, especially to poor Robert Conrad's character, the police officer. And so I always enjoy that because there is a lot of mayhem. It's just not the kind of mayhem where people usually get killed.
Oh, actually, Nancy, you're making me think of, does anybody else watch Leverage?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Do you remember the Christmas episode they had with the whole bank heist in it? I love that episode.
Yep. Been trying to watch the kind of the reboot. It doesn't have quite the same kick, but it's
sadness. I haven't tried it yet.
It doesn't have quite the same kick, but it's still pretty good. So now we've got a little bit of an idea of what your perfect holiday action themed film is. I mean, granted, mine is probably Bad Santa, but Die Hard is right up in there too. What are when you're looking at something like that to be a holiday, a holiday adventure, a holiday story for you, but you want that twist. It's not just about the romance and the happiness for it. What are kind of the things that really take you in some of these holiday action adventure type films? Because again, it's either about, is it just because the holiday is the backdrop, or is it because if you take the holiday out, then you pull the story apart? What are the things about these holiday action adventure type movies that pull you in and really also mean that they still have that importance of the holidays? So Tanya, I'll throw this one to you first.
What I look for in a holiday like story is actually the traditional stuff. I have to say, this is sort of what Nancy was saying about all those trappings, the decorations and the food and the songs. And I think I'm maybe not very original that way, but I like my Christmas holiday to be very standard, everything the way it ought to be. So what would make a really interesting action adventure holiday movie to me would be all of those just normal elements that you would expect, and then there's some sort of mayhem going on in front of those normal elements, and I think people have mentioned a couple of movies where that's going on, but that's what I would want to see, is just a lot of really the traditional familiar. That's what makes it holiday to me.
How about you, Roland?
I was just thinking the thing that always seems to occur in Christmas movies, and even the action-oriented Christmas movies, is like a sudden moment of calm and mindfulness when people, for some reason, appreciate something about the holiday season. And I think even in movies like Die Hard, you've got that. And Die Hard is set in New York, which is one of the most beautiful cities at Christmas time with the tree. And oh no, it's set in Los Angeles now. Forget about that. But on Majesty's Secret Service, like they decorate the Christmas tree in there, and there are these little things that are like, yeah, Christmas is so woven into them. You're right. If you pulled it out, then it would. There's something magical when you insert Christmas into the mix.
So with that element, what is the one element that tells you this really is that holiday movie and not just one where they're just decorating the Christmas tree?
I think it's always when like somebody gives a gift that's super meaningful, or there's some moment where everything pauses and people realize like the spirit of Christmas, or there's always some kind of revelation, and it always seems to be at exactly the point that point of Christmas time or something like that. Maybe it's a kiss under the mistletoe, or maybe it's an explosion outside of a Christmas tree, but there always seems to be at that climax that kind of mixture of it into the set piece.
What about you, Nancy?
I think Roland said it pretty well in terms of what I look for is Christmas has to have some importance in the movie, or whatever holiday we're talking about. For example, I like the movie Sleepless in Seattle, but really that movie doesn't have to take place on New Year's Eve. That movie could take place Valentine's Day, or even, May Day or summer solstice. New Year's Eve is just convenient because it's a sentimental holiday and it doesn't really figure in that much into what the characters are doing. So I would agree that pause, that moment, that special connection between people, because I think that's what a lot of us look for who celebrate Christmas in the holiday season.
How about you, AJ?
I was accused earlier today of writing emotionally healthy, good, dynamic relationships as my kink. And I could not disagree. So that's what I look for in a movie, is when you have the characters who are, maybe they're at odds with each other, or they're just not communicating, or they're miscommunicating, whatever is going on. But they have that moment where they actually communicate. They're starting to connect again. They start to remember why they like this other person. And I love that moment where they're like, okay, we're back on the same page.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into actually the other side, which is now really creating these environments, creating the things for the readers, creating stuff for fans, the people that are diving into our worlds. And so if you're thinking about the books you're writing, the stories you're telling, is there one that you've written, or even if it's somebody else's work that you've gotten into in the action adventure space, what is it for you that pulled you into a story, preferably one that you were creating, that said this story really needs to happen around a holiday? So Roland, since mistletoe all the way.
I was just thinking of I'm actually writing a Christmas romance at the moment as well, and there was Codename Mistletoe, and they both start off in New York City during the Christmas season. But I think all of my heroes, they become very introspective around the holidays, because normally they start off, this whole adventure starts off by them doing something that they're that is not being with their family at Christmas, doing the traditional Christmas thing. Maybe they're working, maybe they're going somewhere or something like that. In Codename Mistletoe, would you believe the heroine is a young professional lady who needed to make some quick money, and her friend was an exotic dancer. So she goes to dance one night at a corporate event as a sexy Santa's elf, which is totally not her thing. And it makes her think about all of the Christmas times she's had in her past, and how she should be with her family in Long Island, but she's not. She's here in a skyscraper in New York City with all these strangers. And I think when you bring in the holiday season, it forces the characters to almost have like an introspective exposition dump quite early on, because they're looking at things and it brings memories. And I think it helps a lot with some rapid characterization when you're trying to introduce characters.
How about you, Nancy?
Well, I tend to use the holiday mostly as a backdrop, but there's one story that I wrote. It's my story in the Christmas at Codename Castle anthology called The Last Favor. And Christmas was important in that story because it is such a time of family celebrations. And the hero has recently lost his father and has come to Codename Castle to pick up an award for his father. they had planned to make a whole trip together, and his father died, and he promised that he would go as his last favor to his father. Unfortunately for him, he is a spy, and an assassin has him in his sights. So his partner comes along to watch his back, because this is one time he's not backing out. So as they watch the run up to the awards, walk through the run up to the award ceremony and do the things the hero and his father had planned to do together, he starts realizing that he's it now. His mom died several years previously. Now his dad's gone. It's just him. There are not going to be any cookies or trappings on the mantle or a tree. And the heroine grew up in a conspicuous consumption family. Her parents didn't get along. Christmas was about impressing everybody. It was about looking perfect. She ran away from home when she was 18. So it creates in him a yearning for that family feeling that's now completely gone for him. And in her, a wistfulness that other people know how to do family, and she doesn't feel like she does. And there's a long-standing attraction between the two of them, but you don't get involved with your partner because that could cost you both your lives. And so that's kind of the setup for the story. And that's kind of a long explanation, but it's Christmas that's the emotional trigger for both of them. So I could not have set this story at any other time of the year. And to be perfectly honest, I can't say that about very many of the stories I write. So this is my holiday centric story.
How about you, AJ?
You know, I kind of get sucked into writing Christmas stories every year. It's not something I typically plan. So I do a long-standing tradition where if my fans send me a Christmas card, I send them one back with a short story included. And it's usually like this little 2-page thing. It's not anything big, and it's related to something that I've released that year. And every year I get more and more cards, and people sending in either requests or ideas throughout the year going, oh, you could do this. And this is a short story. And I'm like, that's a novella, honey. That's not 2 pages. But it's a lot of fun. Like, they enjoy it. I enjoy it. So I don't really think about novellas or books for the most part, because I'm trying to think of 2-page stories, and I suck at that. Like, I cannot write something short to save my life. So most of my brain power is going into that. The 2 Christmas stories we have, I wrote one because I was invited to be part of one of the novella, things that people do. And then the other one, I once again got invited to do something along those lines. And that time actually worked out well for us because I was working on Scales and Spells with Jocelyn Brick. And we had one character that we really wanted to have him have his own partner, but we didn't know where to put it into the series because we had everything planned out. We're like, this is a 4-book series. We don't want it to be more than a 4-book series. So I literally got the invitation while I was shopping for Christmas stuff and was like, she's going to kill me, but this is a good opportunity. And I called her and I was like, Joss, does she want to write her Christmas novella? She's like, what? It's like, it's a good idea, right? And the entire time I'm saying this, my editor's walking behind me, looking like she's going to push me over the balcony. Because she's like, you don't have room for that. I'm like, we'll make room. We'll be good. Because if she and I are writing it together, we'll be done in like 2 weeks. We'll be fine. And she's like, we don't have room for that. We'll make it. We barely made it. Like, she had legit concerns for that. But it was good in the sense that we had it timed for Christmas in the book, because that was the time that my main character he'd taken off from work. This was his Christmas wish, hence the title of the book. And he was desperately trying to prove something, not only to himself, but to his family, that dragons were real, that he was a mage. And that was all he was doing for Christmas, was just proving this one point, because he had to prove that point. And of course, he's right, which is good for him and my dragon. But it wouldn't have worked in almost any other setting, because the wish was strong on both of their parts. And it had to be kind of a holiday magical theme of wishes do come true with Christmas. Like, it had to have that fantasy element to kind of sell the schmoop in the book.
Nothing says holidays like a dragon.
Right?
A red and green dragon, sure.
Sure.
I mean, he's a red dragon, so it fit perfectly.
How about you, Tanya?
So the book that I best integrated the Christmas holiday into, it was called 12 Dates of Christmas, and it went with the song, the 12 Days of Christmas. So there was, this guy having a date on every day and making that date correspond to the line from the song. And so that was the really entertaining part for me, was figuring out how I'm going to have like a date about maids and milking. And it was just fun. And it was a sort of a fake relationship book where the main character is having this very fake, very public relationship, going on these fake dates all around the 12 Days of Christmas song, while in the meantime he's getting involved in a real relationship. And in those scenes, that was where I got to put in all of the stuff I was saying I like about Christmas, all the traditional, food and the decorating and all of that. So it was like a dual reality of the song, like the fakeness of the song versus the reality of just the cozy traditional home Christmas. So that was fun to create.
So when we look at trying to package in, because I mean, the holidays obviously come pre-built in, both with all the happiness and the joy and everything else, but also come built already with a lot of conflict already. There's always the little things that are going on. Sometimes it's family and stuff that doesn't get together too often, or friends that cross paths, or the way things that come together. And when you're especially writing things in that action adventure type of genre, you're putting in things where there's already another conflict happening, whether it's truly much more in the romantic elements where you've just got people trying to figure out how to get together. So do you see this really kind of ramps up and amplifies the story in a way that you wouldn't any other time? So Nancy, like with yours, they're coming in and, you've got, truly, an adventure novel. So when they're going in and trying to navigate these waters and dealing with both the emotions that the holidays bring up, as well as all the other conflict, is this something that actually amps up the story for you?
It did for me. Everybody responds to things differently, but writing that story did for me. My dad died on the first day of December. And so I kind of knew where the hero was coming from. This was years ago. It's not like he died right before I wrote the story, but I knew what it was like to have that sense of loss for the first time going into this big holiday. And so for me, it was kind of a confluence of things that I think kind of ramped up the emotional level in the story, which with a romance, as long as you don't take it over the top into caricature, is, I think, a good thing.
What about you, AJ?
Christmas has always been kind of this buzz of activity in my house. Mostly because my mother and father just both adore Christmas to pieces, and they will go to extremes. So like one year my mother had 3 Christmas trees. So we never got to rest during Christmas. It was always a matter of we had to get this, and this done. And then of course, as soon as the holiday was over, we had to put it all back again. So I kind of associate Christmas with work that I did not sign up for. And I guess that's kind of carried over into my books. Because the 2 Christmas novellas I have, there's very much the external plot. Like in Wish, my poor mage is trying to find a dragon. So he's literally hopping from airport to airport in Europe, trying to get close enough for a seeking spell to kick in and actually work. And that's like the driving force in between him being chased by these strange men that are trying to kidnap him. And in my other one, I have a ghost in a snow globe that's in the hands of a FBI agent who can't really see her. And he has to somehow figure out how to get her back to a medium to get her properly exercised, because he's not a trained medium. He doesn't know what to do with her. So like both holiday books I have is them working. Like they don't actually get much time off. And then when they finally do get to stop and rest, that's when they get to actually enjoy family.
How about you, Tanya?
I'm trying to think. I don't think any of my suspense books really use Christmas itself as a conflict. More the like an approaching deadline. So you have that sense of urgency that there's the end is coming because of the way that it works out. Like things need to be resolved by this time, or weather. So I love a good snowed in romance, right? Where like the weather itself is an adversary. So it's not Christmas so much as that like just whole winter season. I have a good snowed in suspense book where there are three people snowed to get in together in a house, and somebody is coming through the snow to get them, and it's all a question of whether they'll be able to, get out in time. But Christmas doesn't so much play a part there. I could see like what Nancy's got. She's really working the Christmas itself into the conflict, and that's great.
So how about you, Roland?
I think I agree with Tanya. There's always a sense of a deadline and a kind of time constraint, which I think works really well in Christmas stories. Because maybe it doesn't mean much, but it, like the moment it turns from Christmas Eve to Christmas Day always seems like a thing. Not quite like New Year's Eve, but for me, when writing the Christmas things, it was that sense of urgency, that sense of driving towards some kind of climax that just you can't help but kind of have that accelerated by involving Christmas.
So when you look at the characters you're bringing in story, when you're looking at how they're looking at things and how they're dealing with things, do the ideas of working around the holidays, how, other than the fact of maybe you've got this deadline that's looming because, December the 25th is probably not going to move. If you're looking at that as I've got to make this, is that a great fixed counting clock to say if I don't hit this deadline, I don't get to have X, whether it is time with family, whether it is the romance, however those things play together. So, I mean, obviously we're always looking for that ticking clock to create that pressure valve, but that's one that I think everybody can relate to. So when you look at your own stories and the things that you've told, how well has that played into your stories, that idea of the holiday ticking clock, whether in that date and time? How about you, AJ?
One of them, it was very much prevalent. Wish, it was very much the thing because he did have a ticking clock. He only had X amount of days to wander around Europe and try to find a dragon. And then when the holiday season was done, he was supposed to be done. He was supposed to be flying home. So I did have that finite window to work in, which actually is very helpful for me as an author. I don't know about the rest of you, but I have the terrible, terrible habit of losing track of days as I'm writing a book. And I will have, that's my editor's main complaint with me. She's like, what day is this? I'm like, I don't know what day makes sense. Assign the chapter a day. I don't care. So some days I'll have 4 chapters on the same day. And she's like, look, in order for all this to happen, that would be like a 36-hour day. Something needs to give. This needs to happen the next morning. So yeah, it was nice in the fact that I had a 2-week window basically in Wish where I knew this had to happen before Christmas because that was his deadline. And it was nice too because it kept the tension up, which is always the other thing that we're like struggling with, is keeping the tension up so everyone's interested in actually reading what's going on. But yeah, the other book not as much because technically it started before Christmas, but it resolved after Christmas.
How about you, Tanya?
So the one where I had like a ticking clock was a relationship deadline, and it was technically the end of the term was the deadline. So 2 people in a relationship, one of them is in college and they're proximate to each other, and when that end of term comes, he's supposed to be leaving for a month, and he really wants to fix, like cement this relationship, and maybe actually we could, move in together instead of me going home for winter break. And so that's the relationship ticking clock, is he wants to get everything settled before the school term ends.
How about you, Roland?
So Codename Mistletoe, it's a Christmas Eve party, and you've got like the stroke of midnight when Christmas happens. That kind of leads into it, but also there's a hostage situation that comes up, so you can't really help but have a ticking clock and a sense of urgency, and like midnight is the deadline for the terrorists. So it kind of fits quite nicely in, because I was imagining skyscraper in New York City, and of course in New York, stroke of midnight on Christmas, people celebrate. You can hear a cheer all across the city. So it like was a microcosm of that in the top of the skyscraper.
Please tell me it snowed right at midnight. Oh,
I'm pretty sure it did actually. Yep, I'm that cliched. But you know, overkill is underrated.
that's what George Lazenby thought. So Nancy, how about you?
You know, I don't think I really have a ticking clock in any of my holiday stories. I'm hoping that there is jeopardy and plenty of action and a sense of the bad guys closing in. But in terms of there being a ticking clock and a deadline, probably not so much. In Gigi's Magic Christmas, she's gone home for the holidays, and to her, it's like, how much time is left in the holidays and when can I leave? Because as much as she loves her family, she's the last unmarried daughter, and her mother is determined to rectify that every time she comes home. So that's the only thing that's really affected by the time frame in the holiday stories that I have.
Yeah, that's a ticking clock. That's absolutely a ticking clock.
Not ticking fast enough, right?
Not, yeah.
Yeah.
She has my sympathies, because that's my situation.
That was my situation too, actually.
Right.
Oh, I want to say on the days thing, I have a terrible time keeping up with that. And when I wrote the last historical fantasy book, I was coordinating the events in the story with historical events. And so what I ended up doing, in case anybody else is out there, you know, if this works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's great too. I put the date of the scene in parentheses on the rough, and I decided that carried over so well that now I just do it. It's like day 1, day 2, day 3, and it works for me. It might not work for everybody, although when my editor looked at the draft of the historical fantasy, she said, "You're not wanting to keep these on there, are you?" No, they can go as soon as we're satisfied with it. But just wanted to toss that out there in case it's a method that would help anybody.
Yeah,
That was the best part of writing 12 Dates of Christmas, was I always knew what day I was on.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Definitely would be helpful. Yeah, this last book, I actually was plotting with my editor in the car while we were going to GRL. So she typed up the outline for me and put it into Google Docs. And she actually included, this is Friday, this is Saturday, this is Sunday, which was so helpful, because when I went to the outline, I was like, okay, so what would happen last chapter? I've slept since then, I don't remember. Oh, it's Saturday. Right, they had the big reveal yesterday, because yesterday was Friday. Okay, I'm good. I really hope she keeps doing that, because that was very beneficial for me. Probably her too, because that saves her sanity.
I think I need that in my real life.
Yeah.
Right.
Sanity, or the editor following you around like that?
Oh, if I need to wake up
notification
and be
of
like,
what-
oh, it's Saturday. This is what's meant to
Yes.
happen.
Yeah, I have that. It's called I Never Leave My Office, and something's going to tell me what day it is eventually. I hope.
Well,
Oh,
I mean, I have a PA that does that. And when I hired her, I was like, look, I need you to be my professional babysitter. Okay. You are my mother. Remind me to do things on certain days. And she's like, okay, that's the only way I can manage. Because I work from home too. I don't have anything outside that draws me out very often. So something has to remind me.
Especially lately. During the early days of lockdown, there was somebody on my Twitter feed who was every day doing that. Today is Saturday. Today is Sunday. I was like, this is so helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, at the end of it, it really is all about the characters and the story and the relationships. I mean, everything we're writing and doing, and it's it's how do they react to the things that we put them through. I mean, that's the fun of it, right? Is how do we get to torture our characters and how we get to watch them fight back. So in your stories, and so Tanya, I'm going to start with you on this one, since you went through the 12 days of Christmas. You know, what are the kinds of things you like to run them through and to watch them, you know, have to come up with the ways of getting out of things? And I mean, when you're building the story, what are the things that you really wanted to do, as you're talking about the fact that he's got these 12 fake dates as well as a real relationship building in the background? I'd imagine that's a lot of fun.
That was fun. I think, you know, in general, well, like I said, when I'm writing the action adventure stuff, for some reason that goes with BDSM, so that I am putting them through some things. So, but you know, what I really like to do is put my characters in a situation that they're going to have to get out of together. Like, rather than do a darkest moment where there's a breakup going on at the 75% mark or thereabouts, I like to do a darkest moment in that, you know, in the plot, in the suspense, and then actually have the two of them solve it together and strengthen the relationship that way. So, so what I'm putting them through, I'm usually putting them through together. That they're going to have to figure out how my strength works with your strength, so that now this relationship is going to, you know, get us out of captivity or solve the crime or whatever situation that I've put them into. So that's really my thing. Whatever I do to them, I try to do to them as a team, so they can use teamwork to solve it, as opposed to putting them contrary to each other.
How about you, Roland?
Tanya, that was brilliant. That was genius. I love what you said then. I did one of the great things, like romance books, you have 75%, you always have the breakup. And yeah, when you bring suspense and thriller elements into it, it can be an external force, like terrorists splitting them up, which I find so much easier to write than having like some kind of emotional thing break them up. Because I think, you know, I try my best as a man writing romance books, but I think sometimes emotionally I'm not as sophisticated as some of the female authors I'm fans of. And so having an external force coming in there, it's a way to separate the hero and the heroine, and they have to fight to get back together. But it seems really natural and organic, and it's authentic for me to write, and I enjoy it. And I think it still works within the beats of a romance story. So yeah, that was pure genius what you just said.
Terrorists or in-laws, one or the other. How about you, Nancy?
Well, I agree with what Roland and Tanya just said. One of the things I really like to do, though, is make the hero and heroine confront what they're afraid of, not just who's coming after them that they're worried about or concerned about, but what inside you are you afraid of? And in The Last Favor, the heroine is afraid that if she gives into her attraction for the hero, her ineptitude at the whole family thing will screw it up, and they'll both be unhappy, and he'll hate her and she'll hate herself. And so she has to confront that. And in Magic and Mistletoe, which is also a short story, Roland is a badass and Perry's a bookworm. And he is afraid that she will think he is stupid, that he's a deputy shire reeve, which is like a deputy U.S. Marshal. He's built like a linebacker. And he's afraid that he's just not bookish enough to run with her. And so that's what he has to confront. And she's worried that she can't handle the danger in his job. And so I sort of don't whole hog break them up either a lot of the time, but I do have them wondering, can we make a go of this? And so I kind of like to do that, but I do break them up sometimes. It just depends on the story.
AJ? And you're on mute.
I promise I hit that button. I promise. I'm the queen of, I want them to communicate and have a healthy relationship. I hate miscommunications and I hate false breakups. Hate them. That is my main complaint in Asian dramas, because they love that trope and I every time I hit episode 11, I start screaming because that's a 70% mark for them. Neither here nor there. One of the things I love to do with my characters, especially in my series where I've got the same couple from book to book, is I have them work on some kind of internal issue that they know they have and they know is going to affect the relationship. So they honestly look at it and go, this is a problem. I've got to address this before it really starts to hamper, my relationship with him. And like with Brandon's Very Merry Haunted Curses, he just realized before the Christmas holidays started that he's bisexual. And that was a huge thing for him because he thought he was straight for 32 years. And he's like, I don't even feel comfortable in my own skin right now. This is weird. Why? What? So it was him kind of coming to terms with that, but also him being comfortable enough to pursue someone that he found attractive, even as he was kind of settling into his own skin. So I brought that into the mix with the book. But for the most part, when I hit that 75% mark, I'm kind of with Tanya on this. I bring an external force in so that you can see them go, oh, that's a problem. And they just go side by side to address it, because that's the one thing that I love to show in a book is how good they are together. It's not them against each other, it's them against the problem.
So I think that goes to a really fun question and a fun idea. What is one of your favorite tropes to play with across all of your books? And then once you're playing with that, do the holidays then actually influence how you're playing with that trope? So Roland,
that's
you
a
don't
really
get to run
interesting
from this
question.
one.
I know. I was going to say, I was like sitting there going, like, I hope it doesn't pick me first.
You're first.
That's a really interesting. AJ, I just loved what you said about the character. Actually, it was Nancy as well said the same thing about the characters having to overcome their own doubts and insecurities and things. And I think that's something that I have in my books that maybe I don't focus on much, but a lot of stuff you write just comes out. I think I almost feel like we're radios and we just like we receive these transmissions and like vomit them out onto the page. And so there are those elements like that. And I think that's something that goes through, and it always gets amplified at Christmas time. When you're with your family, you always feel super insecure, and all of the childhood insecurities. You could live 20 years on top of the world and you go back to your family and suddenly you're a kid again. And then when you bring in somebody who makes you feel insecure because you're attracted to them, then that gets amplified even more. And it's the pressure of the holidays. So yeah, I think the wonderful thing about the holiday season in books, it just makes everything more.
Nancy?
I'm sorry, I've totally blanked on the question. You mind repeating
Well, in looking at the tropes you play with in stories, because we all have those favorite things that we play with over and over again in story. Do you have a favorite trope, but then when you try to integrate it into the holidays, it really just sort of changes, or does the holidays change it?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I like Friends to Lovers a lot, and I like Second Chance at Love. And Gigi's Magic Christmas and The Last Favor are both Friends to Lovers. And I do think that the holiday kind of magnifies sentiment, especially the Christmas holiday. Like my story in Trick or Treat at Canham Castle is a Guy Fawkes Day story. And I mean, yeah, we have a bonfire and fireworks and people stand around and drink and eat, and it's really cool. And I think we should do that in this country. But I don't get the impression it's a holiday that really magnifies people's emotional states. And so with Gigi, it's the guy next door. Been friends all their lives, kind of danced around it, don't want to ruin their friendship. But it's the holiday and the events around the holiday that push them together. So I guess my answer is sometimes.
How about you, AJ?
I would say the trope I play with the most is fated mates. Hand down, running. I do play with that a little bit. It's not always a magical get together, but considering that I don't write Omegaverse at all, it's interesting how many fated mates I have, especially in the Scales and Spells series. We played with that a lot. because the dragons were always looking for a mage, and their mage was always the person that they had been waiting for, and they would recognize the right person almost immediately. But of course, their mages are human, so they kind of have to take a little bit more time to figure this out. They don't have the same instincts as a dragon does. I do play with it in the Christmas novellas in a sense of they have to choose that this is going to be the person for them. It's not something forced upon them. And it's kind of the spirit of the holiday season that brings out that wistfulness for them to help make the decision, if that makes sense.
How about you, Tanya?
This is a really good word. It applies to a lot of, I think, romance conflicts.
Okay, well, I was glad you didn't call on me first. Sorry, Roland. Yeah, because I had to start with, do I have a favorite trope? I feel like I'm sort of the queen of anti-trope, honestly, that when I do a trope, I never do it again. I'm bored with it after I do it. And I usually do it wrong. Like, you know, I have that snowed in story, but they are not making snow angels and Coco. They are a double agent and an addict who's going into withdrawal, and there's a Russian spy coming to get them. So like that's not usually what people are looking for when they're looking for a snowed in romance, you know. So I sat here thinking, like, what appears the most in my books, and I think that it is the anti-miscommunication trope, or the anti you know, that thing where somebody sees something and they don't understand it, or somebody does something wrong, and then they just like, they break up with the person and they delete his phone number and they run away, and then 3 months passes before then I'm like, what? So I do the anti of that. Like, there's almost always a point in my book where somebody really screws up, and then they apologize, and the other person is like, oh, okay, that's all right, I understand. Like, I love putting that moment into my books, that moment of forgiveness, and like, oh yeah, you're a human. It's all right. We can work through this, you know? So I have a Christmas book. It's not really a suspense book, but it's called Giving Chances. And it's about a guy whose family disowned him when he came out. And now it's a year later at Christmas, or 3 years later at Christmas time, and they have invited him over for Christmas. And he's trying to decide whether or not he's willing, basically, to give them a second chance. And so that's the theme of the book is, yeah, all right, you know, let's give people chances.
So if we look at the stories we've been talking about here, you know, and this could be a spoiler-free zone, but is there something in there, whether it's one of the darlings you couldn't kill? What's kind of the one favorite little thing you managed to slip in there, whether it's an Easter egg, whether it's just even something you put in there just for yourself to slip in there that, you know, whether other people know it or catch it or not? What's the one thing you slipped in? So Nancy, I'm gonna throw this one at you first.
I'm having amnesia. I don't know. If you'd asked me about the science fiction, I put in Easter eggs for people who read certain comic books. We'll make the associations. I'm not really, I don't know it.
How about you, AJ?
So I like to slip in things that I actually have experience with and not everybody would realize unless they knew me personally. So with Mac and Brandon's books, I made Mac Creole from Louisiana. And what most people don't know is that I actually lived down in that area for 6 years when I was a kid. And I was used to the French speaking people. And by the way, they can talk a mile a minute. I was 7 when we moved down to Mississippi. I was just north of New Orleans for about 6 years. And I had to literally adjust my hearing to be able to keep up with what they were saying. So when I had time to create the character for Mac, I thought, you know, we don't see a lot of Creole speaking people in books. At least I couldn't think of anybody. So I kind of slipped that in there. And it was cute to me because I had readers who would message me going, are you from that area? Because they recognized the places that I was referencing, which aren't famous places. They're not large. And I'm like, well, sort of. I lived down there at one point. I did have to look stuff up because I've slept since then. I didn't remember how to spell anything, but it was fun for me to kind of maneuver that in. With Wish, I think we were slipping in some of the German that I was learning in class. I'm currently studying German because I'm crazy. And I was able to like slip in some of the words that I know. And I had, again, readers contacting me going, do you speak German? Not really, but thank you for noticing.
How about you, Tanya?
So I have a group of friends that I used to meet at Starbucks to write with. And back at that time, Starbucks sold something they called youthberry tea, which was just a collection of ingredients, right? But we just thought it was funny, like this youthberry tea is this totally made up thing. And so we all kind of committed to putting the word youthberry into our books whenever we could. So it's not in all of my books, but you will find a lot of my books have like youthberry tea or youthberry wine or a youthberry bush or something. And I actually had somebody bother to comment on a book that was about shape-shifting wolves, right? Gay shape-shifting wolves that go into heat. Had a person comment in a review that there was no such thing as youthberries. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't realistic enough for you there. But yeah, so if you see youthberries in my book and wonder, well, what are youthberries? Now you know.
How about you, Roland?
My favorite two thing, I love putting, I mean, something like Codename Mistletoe is so obviously Die Hard if it was a romance movie, but it doesn't have, I didn't like lift any particular names or anything, and it's set in a different city and stuff like that. But it's like, other than that, it's so obvious. And I kind of enjoyed that because, I don't know, I enjoyed that. It has the structure. I did write one book called Branded by the Modern Day Pirate, which is about a pirate in off the coast of Somalia, which to me in my head was like telling the story of Conan the Barbarian. And there was one line that was kind of mirrored something from Conan the Barbarian. I had a fan write to me and be like, oh, don't think we didn't notice that. I'm a fan of Conan the Barbarian too. And like the fact that I put this through, it was a contemporary romance story set on the coast of Africa. But the fact that she noticed that there were so many sort of like subtle nods to this 80s film with Arnold Schwarzenegger, just it warmed my heart because it was like, oh, my readers are part of the same crazy tribe that I am. And that's what I really love. It's like when you write this stuff and it resonates with somebody, it's like finding a kindred spirit out there.
It's very fun too if you guys put in music at all. I've done that several times where I've referenced a group or a song that my character's listening to while working. And I've had people go in and YouTube stuff because they're like, what is this? And then they come back to me going, The Who is awesome. I didn't know that Monks did heavy metal. I was like, isn't it cool?
There's a singer-songwriter down in Texas I'm obsessed with called James McMurtry, and I keep mentioning his songs, and then people are like, quit it with James McMurtry. It's like in every book.
No, my taste in music is so pedestrian that I would not be impressing anybody with it. Anything I'm mentioning, they already well know.
Yeah, if I'm throwing in mine, it's going to go off the rails somewhere.
They might get a musical reference, which probably almost nobody gets because I do like my musicals. But
yeah, well, I occasionally have to work in the bagpipes just for, good measure. Well, before we get out of here, so there's one last question. So since things are kind of sort of getting back and we're all able to actually, at least in some cases, start to reconnect with friends and family this year after last year, what's the one thing you guys are really looking forward to this holiday season? And so AJ, I'm actually going to start with you on this one.
Well, I'm actually going to be mostly alone this Christmas for once. Most of my family is down in Tennessee, and I've been invited to my brother's in-laws for Christmas dinner, but I'll have Christmas Day and Christmas Eve mostly to myself. So honestly, I'm looking forward to sleeping in. I've never had the chance to do that.
How about you, Tanya?
oh, definitely seeing the people again. Yeah, doing those. Last year I I didn't see my brother and my nephews who lived nearby. So having them over for Christmas, seeing my partner's cousins, they always have a big spread, and just having some sense of normalcy and all of the excellent food that we get at these events too. I'm not a good cook myself, but I know a lot of good cooks, so we will make the rounds.
How about you, Roland?
I love living in New York at Christmas time because of the snow, and it's so beautiful and things like that. And it's going to sound crazy. I like barbecuing in the snow, barefoot in the snow, maybe having a cigar or a glass of Scotch whiskey and having some friends there talking, some adult friends, because I have 3 kids. And for the last 2 years, it's been me and 3 kids. And so I miss adult conversation. Like talking to you guys is wonderful. So yeah, I'm looking forward to like
mistake anybody here as an adult.
It's our age that makes them think that.
Well, I'm not 43. I'm 18 with 23 years experience.
How about you, Nancy?
The Christmas tree. It's the highlight of the Christmas season for me when we decorate it. We have these friends we haven't seen in probably 20 years, and they used to always come over and decorate the Christmas tree with us. And several years they brought us an ornament when they came. And so those ornaments are in their own little special box. And she made us a beautiful Christmas tree skirt. It's got 4 cross-stitched panels with holiday motifs on it. And she set them on holly with a black background and gold highlights and trimmed it with gold braid. And so every time we put those things on the tree, it's like bringing them closer. They moved across the country, and sometimes things just don't work out to get together. But it always reminds me of that when we put the things they gave us on the tree. And we collect ornaments when we go on trips. And I think I'm the only person who remembers which ornaments came from where, but my husband will look at it and know we got it somewhere on a trip. And so decorating the tree is kind of a walk down memory lane and a walk with other people. We have a little white plastic reindeer that I think my parents bought at the 5 and Dime the first year they were married. I think he probably had 7 companions, but he doesn't anymore. And the little strip around him that used to be red has faded to pink, and the little loop on his back for the hook has broken. But that ornament connects our Christmas to my parents' Christmases before I was born. And so we're really looking forward to it. Our son's girlfriend is going to come and help us decorate the tree. And so that'll be fun. And so it's a combination of people and memories that really make the holiday for me.
Well, I appreciate everybody coming to hang out with us this evening and have a really fun holiday conversation. But before we get out of here, I'm going to go in reverse order and let everybody know where they can find you, website, social media, where they can get all these holiday books to stack on their to-be-read pile, and anything else they need to pick up for gifts this holiday season. Yeah, that word. So Nancy, how about you?
Well, my website is nancynorthcott.com, and there's information about me and about the books and stories there. And the fiction is available on all the online platforms. The social media that I spend the most time with is Twitter, and I probably spend more time there than is good for me. I'm at Nancy Northcott. I'm just getting into Instagram, and I haven't figured it out yet, and I don't even remember what my username is because it's some combination of my name and some numbers. And I'm one of those people. I was a history major. You do the math. So I just have to search myself to find me on Instagram. So if you feel inclined to do that, you can probably find me. But that's really about it. And I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season.
Roland, how about you?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I had a ton of fun, and it's so nice to be in such distinguished company. I'm actually on Instagram a lot. Instagram is the only social media I really bother with because everyone seems nice there. And I'm at Roland Hulme. And if you look up my name on Amazon, you'll see Codename Mistletoe because it's got a big hunky Santa kissing a slinky elf and a big explosion in the background. So feel free to check that out. I think it's a lot of fun.
How about you, Tanya?
So the best place to find me is probably on my website, which is tanyachris.com. I'm not very active on any social media, but I guess I'm most active on Facebook. My most recent BDSM/action adventure mashup is called Hell's Bedroom, and that is on exclusive to Amazon right now, so it's in Kindle Unlimited. But almost everything else, including those Christmas stories I talked about, 12 Dates of Christmas and Giving Chances, are published wide, so you can get them from any retailer.
And AJ.
So everything's on Amazon that I've published. You can always find things there. If you want to get something specific and autographed, you can go to my website, ajsherwood.com. I do have a Twitter. I ignore it. I have Facebook, which I'm on constantly. You're welcome to come and join my Facebook group, AJ's Gentleman. I post in there very regularly. And if anyone is so inclined to send me a Christmas card so they can have the short, because the shorts are only available during Christmas. I don't release them any other place. Then all the information for that is on my website, and you can send me a card. And I cannot believe I just fucking said that, because the stack of cards on my table right now is ridiculous. I've actually had to hire in help. I've had so many Christmas cards, and I'm a week behind because I was on vacation last week. I don't even want to open my mailbox right now, guys. It's not good. I don't want to look. I don't want to know.
That's a fun surprise. We all like to get
what I would have
presents.
looked for now.
Well, and I have had the pleasure of being your host, Jim Nettles, and you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, of course, here at ConTinual, and I do haunt Facebook a bit. I do occasionally show up on the Hive of Scummy that is Twitter. I am out there on Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, kind of all over the place. And want to say happy holidays to everybody. And thanks for coming in and joining us. We'll see you again soon.
Bye, everyone.